Your Honor, I'll defend my dad.
What the hell did you just say?
My name is Jayla Dawson. I'm here as co-counsel.
Get that filthy little black girl out of my courtroom!
His face went red. Spit flew from the corner of his mouth.
Stink like the back of a bus wearing that in here.
Your Honor, the court granted my motion 3 weeks ago.
I didn't sign a damn thing for you, you little rat. Crawl back to the gutter you from.
Sir, my father is the defendant. I'm not leaving him,
Jayla set her binder on the table and opened it anyway. What happened in the next 6 hours, no one inside that courtroom will ever forget. 6 weeks before that gavel came down, the morning in Cedar Brook Heights still belonged to the quiet. It was 5:30. The sky over the little brick house on Mulberry Lane was the color of an old bruise, and the only sound on the block was the slow drip of the coffee maker in the kitchen. Jayla Dawson sat at the dining room table with 3 casebooks open around her, like a fan of playing cards. Each one was stuffed with yellow sticky notes. Each one had her mother's handwriting in the margins. The law is only as just as the people who read it. Never trust a clean transcript. Read it twice, then read it again. Eleanor Dawson had written those notes 2 years before she died. She had been a paralegal at a small firm downtown, studying nights for the bar exam. She didn't live long enough to take it. The cancer took her in 11 months, from the day of her diagnosis to the day Jayla held her hand in the hospice. After the funeral, Jayla didn't cry for a long time. She just picked up her mother's casebooks, carried them to the dining room table, and started reading where Eleanor's last highlighter mark stopped. She had been reading every morning since. She was 17 now, valedictorian candidate at Fairhaven East High, a 1,540 on her SATs, a full ride waiting at the State University's pre-law pipeline program. Her teachers called her the quietest thunderstorm they had ever taught. The screen door creaked. Her father stepped in from the back porch, thermos in hand, engine grease already under his nails from an early oil change. "Morning, baby girl. You eat?" "I will, Daddy. Promise." Elijah Dawson was 42, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and the patient voice of a man who had spent half his life listening to strangers describe their broken cars. He had owned Cedar Brook Auto for 11 years. Everybody in the neighborhood knew him. He fixed brake pads for single mothers at cost. He let old Mr. Wesley pay for a transmission job in homemade sweet potato pies. On Sundays, he and Jayla walked to the small brick church on Jefferson Avenue and sat in the third pew, where Eleanor's name was engraved on a little bronze plate. He set his thermos down and kissed the top of his daughter's head. "Your mama would have liked seeing you at this table, same as her." "She is seeing it, Daddy." He smiled. He didn't argue. Out beyond the porch, Cedar Brook Heights was waking up the way it always did. The rumble of the city bus 2 blocks over, the clank of Mr. Wesley's trash can lid, a mourning dove calling from the power line. Cedar Brook was a working-class black neighborhood on the south side of Fairhaven County, Tennessee. Modest houses with chain-link fences, children who rode bikes until the streetlights came on, families who had lived on the same block for 3 generations. 3 miles north, on a hill that overlooked all of it, stood the Fairhaven County Courthouse. White stone, wide steps, a brass eagle over the entrance. And inside, in the high-ceiling chambers at the end of the second-floor hallway, sat a man named Howard Blackwood. Judge Blackwood had been on the bench for 28 years. He had gone to a private boys' academy, then law school on his grandfather's money, then straight into the district attorney's office before being appointed to the bench at 36. He belonged to the country club on the north side of town. He drove a gray Cadillac. He believed, as he often said to his golf buddies over whiskey, in law and order, though anyone who pulled the county sentencing records could see what those words meant to him. Black defendants in his courtroom received sentences, on average, 2.3 times longer than white defendants facing identical charges. A young reporter at the Fairhaven Herald had tried to run that story the year before. The publisher had killed it before it reached the copy desk. Nobody in Cedar Brook Heights had ever heard the name Howard Blackwood. In 6 weeks, they would never forget it. Because on the second Thursday of April, just before closing time at the corner store on Jackson Street, a man in a black hoodie walked in, pointed a handgun at the clerk, and walked out with $430 from the register. And 3 blocks away at Cedar Brook Auto, Elijah Dawson was on the phone with his parts supplier. The call came in on the landline at 6 minutes past 9. Midwest Parts Distributors, confirming a brake pad order for a customer coming in the next morning. Elijah stood behind the counter with the phone tucked against his shoulder, reading back the part numbers one at a time. His boots, size 11, steel-toed, the same boots he'd worn every day for 3 years, were propped up on the crate behind the counter. He was tired. It had been a long shift. Jayla was walking over from the bus stop to meet him. She always did on Thursdays. They'd get barbecue from the stand on Jackson Street and walk home together. She was half a block away when she saw the squad cars, 4 of them, lights spinning silent, officers out of the vehicles with hands on their holsters, fanning out around the open bay door of Cedar Brook Auto like they were storming a fortress. Jayla stopped on the sidewalk. Her backpack slid off her shoulder and hit the concrete. Her mother's old notebook, the leather one she carried everywhere, spilled into a shallow puddle by the curb. "Hands! Hands where I can see them! On the ground! Now!" That was Officer Bradley Morrison. Jayla would learn his name later. She would learn all their names later. Elijah came out of the shop with his hands already up, his thermos still in one of them. He tried to ask what was happening. He got his face pushed against the asphalt for the trouble. A knee went into his back, his cheek scraped open against the pavement. He didn't fight. He didn't raise his voice. He just kept saying over and over the same thing a grown man says when he can't believe what's happening to him. "My daughter's coming! My daughter's coming! Please don't let her see!" But Jayla saw everything. She stood across the street with her mother's notebook soaking in the puddle at her feet, and she watched them handcuff her father. She watched Officer Morrison put his boot on Elijah's shoulder while they searched him. She watched another officer lift Elijah's hands and inspect the grease under his fingernails like he'd just found gold. Yeah, that's consistent. That matches. Elijah looked up from the pavement. His eyes found Jayla's across the street. He didn't shout. He didn't ask for help. He just shook his head once, small, the way a father shakes his head when he wants his child to know, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." Then they put him in the back of a squad car, and they drove him away. Jayla stood there for a long time after the taillights disappeared. She picked up the notebook. She dried the cover on her sleeve, and her jaw set in a way her mother would have recognized instantly. The charge was armed robbery, first degree, use of a firearm in commission of a felony. Potential sentence, 25 years minimum, life maximum. The case against Elijah was built on 3 things, and each of them was worse than the last. First, the surveillance footage. The prosecution had a clip, 6 minutes long, grainy, black and white, shot from a wide angle behind the counter. A man in a dark hoodie, hood pulled up, same approximate height as Elijah, same approximate build. The timestamp on the prosecution's clip read 9:42 to 9:48 p.m. The clip started with the robber already inside the store. Second, the grease. An officer had swabbed under Elijah's fingernails during booking. The lab report came back consistent with petroleum-based lubricants found at the scene, which was another way of saying the robber had maybe touched a countertop, and the store clerk sold motor oil and a mechanic had grease on his hands. 3 facts the prosecution wove together as if they meant something. Third, the clerk. A nervous young man, 22 years old, who had given police 4 different descriptions of the robber in 4 different interviews. By the time he was prepped for trial, his memory had been carefully polished into a clean, confident narrative. Yes, that's the man, I'm sure. Bail was denied. Elijah was transferred to Fairhaven County lockup, 3 miles from his shop, and he stayed there for 41 days waiting for trial, while his business sat dark and the rent fell behind. Prosecutor Catherine Whitfield took the case personally. She was 38 years old, sharp as a letter opener, and already quietly campaigning for the district attorney's seat opening up the following spring. A clean armed robbery conviction would look good on her resume. She wore navy suits and pearl earrings and always smiled at the cameras on the courthouse steps. The defense attorney assigned to Elijah was Gregory Hollis, court-appointed, 63 years old, 63 open files on his desk. He had not tried a case to jury verdict in 9 years. He visited Elijah in lockup exactly twice. The second visit was on a Tuesday. Jayla was allowed in because she was family. The three of them sat around a metal table with a phone receiver between them and a plexiglass wall. 12 years, Hollis said, sliding a document across. Plea deal. Armed robbery reduced to unlawful taking with a firearm. Good behavior, you're out in 8. Take it, Mr. Dawson. The alternative is 25 to life. I didn't do this, Elijah said. Hollis didn't look up from his paperwork. They never do. Jayla leaned forward. Her voice was calm and steady. Mr. Hollis, have you filed a request for the unedited surveillance file? The original with timestamp metadata? Hollis looked at her for the first time, looked her up and down, almost smiled. Sweetheart, go study for the SAT. I already took it. Oh yeah? 1540. There was a long pause. Hollis's almost smile faded. He stacked his papers and stood up. Your father's going to take the deal, or he's going to prison for the rest of his life. You want to play law school, do it somewhere else. He walked out. Elijah pressed his forehead against the plexiglass. Jayla pressed hers against the other side. Daddy, don't you sign anything. You hear me? Baby, don't you sign anything. Mama didn't leave me those books for nothing. You hear me? I hear you, baby girl. That night, Jayla went home alone. She sat at the dining room table. She opened her mother's casebooks. She read until 3 in the morning, and somewhere between the second hour and the third, she found it. A small paragraph on page 412 of the State Criminal Procedure Manual. A discretionary provision. Rare, almost never invoked, but it existed. It was a door. It was a narrow, half-hidden door in a wall that everyone assumed was solid. And Jayla Dawson decided she was going to walk through it. The next morning, Jayla took 2 buses across town to a small brick building on Pinewood Street with a faded sign that read, Pinewood Legal Aid, Walk-ins Welcome. She had found the name in one of her mother's old folders. Eleanor had interned there one summer, back when she was still dreaming about a law degree. The woman at the front desk looked at the 17-year-old with the oversized blazer and the 3-inch binder and raised an eyebrow. You have an appointment, sweetheart? No, ma'am. I was hoping someone could look at a motion I drafted. A motion? Yes, ma'am. The woman blinked once. Wait here. 10 minutes later, a tall, thin man with silver hair and a rumpled tie stepped out of a back office. Benjamin Caldwell, 68 years old, semi-retired. He had been practicing law in Fairhaven County for over 40 years. He took the binder from Jayla without a word and sat down in one of the waiting room chairs to read. Jayla watched him turn the pages. She watched his face change. First curiosity, then something sharper, then something close to disbelief. He closed the binder and looked up at her. Young lady, who helped you write this? My mother. She died 2 years ago. She left her books. And who taught you cite structure? Who taught you how to format a Rule 106 argument? The books, and the State Bar's online archive. It's free if you make an account. Caldwell stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, not unkindly. A laugh like a man who has just been handed proof of something he stopped believing in a long time ago. Come into my office. He couldn't represent Elijah. His firm had a conflict of interest through a county contract. But he could do something else. He could hand her a weapon. From his shelf, he pulled down a worn hardcover, evidentiary objections, a trial manual, and slid it across the desk. This is mine. I've had it since 1984. I'm lending it to you, not giving it. I want it back. Yes, sir. Jayla, listen to me. The only weapon people like Blackwood don't see coming is preparation. Out-prepare them. Out-read them. Out-think them. When he tries to break you, and he will try, remember this. He only has power for as long as you let him see you flinch. Yes, sir. Caldwell wrote a phone number on the back of a business card and pressed it into her palm. That's my cell, day or night. You understand? She did. What came next was 3 weeks. 3 weeks the way a distance runner knows a long race. Not by the miles, but by the small, stubborn rhythm of putting one foot in front of the other until the body gives up arguing. Jayla took the city bus to the State University Law Library every Saturday and Sunday, 45 minutes each way. She sat at a wooden carrel near the window and worked from opening at 9 until the librarian gently touched her shoulder at closing. She printed case law at 5 cents a page, paid for with quarters she had rolled herself. On weeknights after homework, She worked at the Fairhaven Public Library until they shut off the lights. A corkboard went up on her bedroom wall. A timeline of the night of April 9th, marked in green for what the prosecution claimed, red for what the evidence actually showed, and yellow for the gaps, the places where the story didn't fit together. She learned how to subpoena phone records. She learned the state's rules of evidence the way some people learn the lyrics of a favorite song. She learned which objections had teeth and which were just noise. She learned her mother had been right. The law is only as just as the people who read it. In the middle of the second week, she walked 3 doors down to the little yellow house with the porch swing. Mrs. Hattie Greenfield answered the door in her housecoat with a quilt half finished across her lap. "Baby, come sit." Jayla sat. She told Mrs. Greenfield what was happening. Mrs. Greenfield listened without interrupting, the way old women who have seen everything listen. And when Jayla finished, Mrs. Greenfield set down her quilt. "Honey, the night it happened, I was up." Mrs. Greenfield was 78. She had insomnia. She had been sitting by her front window with a cup of chamomile, the way she always did when the nights were long. Her window faced east, up Jackson Street, straight toward Cedarbrook Auto. "Your daddy's truck was at the shop, baby, from 10 after 9 until after 10. I saw the lights. I saw him lock up myself at a 10:15. I told the police 3 times. 3 times? Officer came by the next afternoon. I told him. He wrote it down. Didn't look at me. Then 2 weeks later, another one came. Detective. He acted like I was making it up, said I was confused, said I was old. I told him I've buried a husband and raised 4 boys, and I know what I saw out my own window." Mrs. Greenfield's hand trembled a little on the arm of her chair. "They never called me back, baby. I tried." "Mrs. Greenfield, would you let me take your statement, formally, signed, notarized?" "Baby, I'd walk into that courthouse myself if you asked me to." Jayla took the statement the next day. A paralegal at Caldwell's office notarized it for free. When the motion was finally ready, she carried it to the county clerk's office on the morning of the first Monday in May. Clerk Margaret Ashbury, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s with a son Jayla's age, took the papers across the counter. She read the first page. Then she read the second. Then she read the whole thing. She looked up. "Honey, who drafted this?" "I did, ma'am." Margaret's eyes went shiny. She stamped the motion without another word. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Judge Blackwood is going to see this today. Be ready, sweetheart. He doesn't like motions like this. He especially doesn't like them from people who look like you." "I understand." "No, baby. I don't think you do, but I hope you're right to try." The ruling came back at 4 that afternoon. A single page, signed in Blackwood's sharp black slash of a signature. Motion for discretionary co-counsel status, granted, with restrictions. The court grants the petitioner's highly unusual request with skepticism. The petitioner may sit as second chair. The petitioner shall not address witnesses or the court except where expressly permitted on a question-by-question basis. The court expects these proceedings will demonstrate, on the record, why such motions are rarely granted. Jayla read it twice. Then she smiled for the first time in 41 days. He had opened the door. He thought he was opening it so he could close it on her fingers. He had no idea what was coming through. The motion was only the door. What Jayla found behind it was something else entirely. She had filed a formal records request the same week she met Caldwell. A request for the full, unedited surveillance file from the corner store on Jackson Street. Not the clip, the original. Every frame from that camera on the night of April 9th, with the metadata intact. The prosecution had stalled for 12 days. Then, under a filing deadline, they had handed it over on a cheap USB stick with a sticky note that read, as requested. It was a Wednesday night. Jayla sat at the quiet computer on the 3rd floor of the Fairhaven Public Library with her mother's headphones on her ears and a legal pad open beside her. She plugged in the stick. She opened the file. The first thing she saw was the timestamp. In the lower right corner of the raw footage, in thin, white digital numbers, the clock read 9:29 p.m. The prosecution's clip had started at 9:42 p.m. Jayla's hand went still on the mouse. She pressed play and watched the whole thing. At 9:31 p.m., a man in a dark hoodie walked into the frame, pointed a handgun at the clerk, and took $430 from the register. At 9:38 p.m., he walked out. The entire robbery lasted 7 minutes. It was over 4 minutes before the prosecution's clip even began. She paused the screen at 9:31. She stared at it. At 9:31 p.m., her father had been on the landline at Cedarbrook Auto 3 blocks away, reading part numbers back to a supplier in Ohio. She knew because she had the phone bill. She had subpoenaed it herself, the way Caldwell's manual had taught her. A 14-minute call, from 9:24 p.m. to 9:38 p.m., time-stamped by the phone company, certified. Hollis had never asked for it. She wrote the numbers down on her legal pad in her neat, careful handwriting. She circled them twice. She wrote underneath, "Alibi confirmed by independent telecommunications record." Then she went back to the footage. She watched the robber enter again. She slowed the playback to half speed, then quarter speed, and she saw the second thing. The shoes. The robber was wearing white low-top sneakers, scuffed, a little dirty, but clearly white, clearly canvas, clearly athletic. You could see them in the way he stepped up to the counter. You could see them in the way he turned to leave. Jayla froze a frame. Her father's booking inventory from the night of the arrest was folded inside binder number 2. She pulled it out. Under footwear, 1 pair of steel-toed work boots, size 11, brown leather. Elijah had worn those boots every single day for 3 years. He wore them in the house. He wore them to church. He owned 1 other pair of shoes, a pair of black Sunday loafers, size 11. Jayla flipped to the back of the police report to the appendix Hollis had clearly never opened. Page 31. A forensic note buried in a paragraph about the scene. Partial shoe print recovered from behind the counter. Rubber sole, athletic tread pattern. Estimated size, 9. Size 9. 2 full sizes smaller than her father. Jayla leaned back slowly in the library chair. Her heart was beating so loud she thought the woman at the reference desk might hear it. She had the timestamp. She had the phone call. She had the shoes. 3 things. 3 clean, hard, documented things the prosecution had either hidden, ignored, or never bothered to look at. She printed everything. She paid in quarters. She walked home through the warm May night with the pages folded against her chest, and when she got to the dining room table, she sat down and began to build the 3rd binder. Timeline, physical evidence, witness discrepancies, color-coded tabs. She was not going to court to argue. She was going to court to bury them. The morning of the trial, Jayla woke up at 4. She made coffee the way her father made it, strong, a pinch of salt in the grounds. She dressed in the navy blazer and a white blouse her mother had pressed and never worn. She put on the small silver cross. She carried the 3 binders down to the kitchen, stacked them by the door, and sat at the dining room table in the quiet house until the sun came up. At 8:30, Mrs. Greenfield came by with a pound cake wrapped in foil. "For after, baby, when your daddy comes home." "Yes, ma'am." "He's coming home, Jayla." "Yes, ma'am." Courtroom B on the 2nd floor of the Fairhaven County Courthouse was half full by 9. The gallery held the usual handful of retirees who came to watch trials like other people watch television. Mrs. Greenfield took a seat in the 2nd row. Benjamin Caldwell slipped quietly into the back in a gray suit and sat with his hands folded. A young woman in the press box on the left flipped open a reporter's notebook. Her name was Lila Brennan. She worked for the Fairhaven Herald, the same paper whose publisher had killed the sentencing story the year before. Nobody had asked her to be there. She had seen the docket. Elijah was brought in at 5 of 9 in a gray jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him. He saw Jayla at the defense table and stopped walking for half a second. The bailiff nudged him forward. He sat down. He leaned over and whispered, "Baby, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do, Daddy." Gregory Hollis arrived 2 minutes before the judge. He dropped a thin file on the table, nodded curtly at Jayla, and did not look at his client. He smelled faintly of mouthwash and cigarettes. At 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Howard Blackwood came through the side door in his black robe, settled into his high-backed chair, and surveyed the room the way a man surveys his own living room. His eyes landed on Jayla. The insults came down like hammers. The filthy little black girl, the bus, the rat, the gutter. Every word a cut. Jayla let it happen. She did not sit down. She did not look away. When Blackwood finally stopped to breathe, she spoke in the same calm, clear voice she had used since she was small. Your Honor, with respect. This court granted my motion for co-counsel status 3 weeks ago. The order is on file. If the court wishes to rescind, I would ask that the rescission be entered formally on the record with reasoning so that it may be reviewed. Otherwise, I am prepared to assist Mr. Hollis. She paused. Sir. In the press box, Lila Brennan's pen was already moving. Blackwood's jaw worked. He could feel the reporter. He could feel the gallery. He could feel, for the first time in 28 years, a thing he was not used to feeling in his own courtroom: the weight of being watched. You will not speak, girl, unless I tell you to speak. You will not move unless I tell you to move. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor. One wrong breath and I'll have you removed, and your father will sit here alone. Yes, Your Honor. Elijah closed his eyes against tears. He did not let them fall. Jayla sat down beside him and slid her hand briefly over his cuffed ones under the table. She did not look at him. He did not need her to. The prosecution opened. Catherine Whitfield stood up in her navy suit and her pearl earrings, and she walked to the jury box as if she were walking to a podium to receive an award. She was polished. She was practiced. She painted Elijah Dawson in slow, dark strokes. A struggling business owner, behind on rent, with motive, opportunity, and a grease-stained sin right there on his own hands. She played the crop surveillance clip on a wheeled television. The jury leaned forward. She finished by turning to them with the small, confident smile of a woman who had done this before. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a complicated case. This is a man who walked 3 blocks from his shop, put on a hood, pointed a gun at a young man trying to earn a living, and walked out with $430. The evidence will show you exactly that. Thank you. She sat down. It had taken her 14 minutes. Hollis rose for the defense. He was at the jury box for 90 seconds. He said his client was innocent. He said the prosecution had to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. He said a few vague words about reasonable people and reasonable conclusions. He did not mention an alibi. He did not mention the phone call. He did not mention the timestamp. He did not mention the shoes. He did not mention Mrs. Greenfield's name. He sat down. Jayla's knuckles went white on the edge of the table. Under her breath, so quiet only Hollis could hear, she said one word: coward. He did not look at her. His ears turned red. Whitfield called her first witness, Officer Bradley Morrison, in his dress uniform, walking to the stand with the easy posture of a man who had done this 100 times. He took the oath. He sat. He answered Whitfield's soft, leading questions with clean, confident sentences, the way a man answers questions he has rehearsed. The jury listened. The jury nodded. Whitfield tendered the crop surveillance clip as Exhibit C. No objection, Hollis mumbled, already half standing. Jayla stood up fully. Objection, Your Honor. Rule of completeness. Rule 106. The courtroom went very still. Blackwood turned his head slowly toward her, the way an old dog turns toward a sound it did not expect to hear. Excuse me, young lady. The exhibit is a curated excerpt of a longer recording. The defense requests the full, unedited original be admitted in its entirety, as the law provides. In the press box, Lila Brennan stopped writing and started listening. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Miss Dawson, you were instructed not to address this court without permission. Your Honor, the rules of evidence permit any party, including co-counsel, to raise a standing objection to the admission of an exhibit. Respectfully. And who taught you that? Rule 10-1 of the state's rules of evidence, Your Honor. It's in the manual. A small, involuntary sound came from somewhere in the gallery. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a cough. Blackwood's jaw flexed. In the press box, Lila Brennan turned a page in her notebook without looking down. Whitfield stood. Her voice was smooth, but something had moved behind her eyes. Your Honor, the state has provided the relevant footage. There is no need to burden the jury with hours of ambient store recording. Jayla did not wait to be recognized. Your Honor, Rule 106 is clear. Where a party introduces part of a recorded statement, the opposing party may require the introduction of any other part that, in fairness, ought to be considered contemporaneously. The prosecution's clip begins at 9:42 p.m. The robbery itself, Your Honor, began before that. The defense requests the original file in full. The courtroom held its breath. Blackwood was caught. He could feel exactly how he was caught. The reporter was still writing. The gallery was watching. If he denied the motion, the reason would end up in print by morning. If he granted it, he was granting it to a 17-year-old black girl in a blazer that didn't fit. His knuckles whitened on the gavel. Sustained. Ms. Whitfield, produce the original recording. Your Honor. Produce it, Counselor. Whitfield's lips parted, closed, opened again. The state will need a brief recess, Your Honor, to retrieve the file. You have 20 minutes. The gavel came down. The jury filed out. The gallery stirred. Whitfield turned on her heel and walked toward the hallway like a woman trying not to run. Her two paralegals followed her. The door swung shut behind them. Hollis sat very still at the defense table. He was not looking at anyone. His thin file lay unopened in front of him. Slowly, carefully, he began to gather his papers. "Where are you going?" Jayla asked. "This is not a game, Miss Dawson. I never thought it was. You are going to destroy your father's only chance. You are going to hand the prosecution grounds for reversal on appeal." Mr. Hollis, she turned to him fully. Her voice stayed low. Her voice stayed calm. But it had an edge in it now. The edge her mother had used when she was done being patient with a man who wasn't listening. "You destroyed his chance the day you didn't subpoena the phone records. You destroyed it the day you didn't read page 31 of the police report. You destroyed it the day you told my father they never do, and walked out of the jail without looking at him. I have the phone records. I have the original footage request. I have an alibi witness whose statement you never opened. If you want to sit here and be a chair, Mr. Hollis, be a chair. But don't you pretend, in front of my father, that you are his lawyer." Hollis's face went the color of old paper. His mouth worked. Nothing came out. He stacked his files. He picked up his thin leather briefcase. He stood. He walked out of the courtroom, and he did not look back. At the clerk's desk, Margaret Ashbury watched him go. Her eyes found Jayla's across the room. Margaret gave her the smallest nod. The kind of nod you give someone at a funeral when you cannot say out loud what you mean. The defense table was empty now, except for a father and his daughter. Elijah turned in his chair. The cuffs clinked softly. "Baby girl, you don't have to." "Daddy." She took his hand. She squeezed it. She did not let go. "Mama didn't leave me those books for nothing." Out in the marble hallway, Whitfield stood near a water fountain with her two paralegals, speaking in the low, fast voice people use when they are losing. One of the paralegals was already on the phone with the evidence clerk at the sheriff's office. The other was staring at her tablet and shaking her head. They had a cropped file, a cleaned-up excerpt prepared for jury viewing. They did not have the raw recording queued up and ready. They had assumed, the way prosecutors in Fairhaven County had been assuming for years, that no one on the defense side would ever bother to ask. Inside the courtroom, Jayla slid the unedited file from Binder 2 onto the defense table. She had a certified copy, obtained through her own records request, chain of custody documented, metadata intact. She was ready to hand it to the bailiff herself if she had to. The clock on the wall ticked past the 15-minute mark, then the 17-minute mark. At 19 minutes, the side door opened. Whitfield walked back in. She was carrying a small black hard drive. "Your Honor, the state has located the full unedited file." "Play it, Counselor." The television was wheeled back into place. The bailiff plugged in the drive. The clerk dimmed the overhead lights. The jury was brought back in and seated. The footage began. In the lower right corner of the screen, in thin white digital numbers, the clock read 9:29 p.m., 2 minutes of an empty store. The clerk behind the counter, reading something on his phone. Then, at 9:31 p.m., the door of the corner store on Jackson Street swung open, and a man in a dark hoodie walked in and pointed a handgun at the clerk. The timestamp glowed like a wound. At the defense table, Jayla did not move. In the second row, Mrs. Greenfield put her hand over her mouth. In the press box, Lila Brennan wrote 4 words in her notebook, underlined twice. Clip starts at 9:42. In the jury box, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. He had been nodding through the prosecution's opening. He was not nodding now. The footage ran through. 7 minutes. The robber walked out at 9:38. The store sat empty. The real clock, the real time, ticking in the corner for anyone who cared to look. The lights came up. Blackwood cleared his throat. "Miss Dawson, you may examine the witness." He said it the way a man gives permission to something he already knows he cannot stop. Officer Bradley Morrison returned to the stand. He looked smaller than he had the first time. He adjusted his collar. Jayla rose with a single index card in her hand. She did not need more. "Officer Morrison, what time does your incident report state the robbery occurred?" "Approximately 9:40 to 9:45 p.m. "Approximately." "Yes." "Did you personally review the full unedited surveillance recording before you filed that report?" "I reviewed what was provided to me." "By whom?" "By Detective Sullivan." "So the answer to my question, officer, is no. You did not personally review the full recording." "Correct." "Officer, at 9:31 p.m. on the night of April 9th, my father, Elijah Dawson, was on the landline at Cedar Brook Auto, 3 blocks from the scene, placing a 14-minute order with Midwest Parts Distributors in Dayton, Ohio. Defense Exhibit 3. Itemized phone records subpoenaed from the telephone company, certified by their records custodian. Would you like to review them?" Morrison's eyes flicked to Whitfield. She did not meet them. "I would not. Thank you, officer. No further questions at this time." Jayla sat. The silence in the room was the kind of silence that has weight. Whitfield stood fast. "Redirect, Your Honor." "Proceed." Whitfield turned to the jury, not the witness. She was smart enough to know where her last ground was. "Miss Dawson, a phone record shows a call was placed from your father's shop. It does not show who was holding the receiver. Anyone could have dialed that number. Isn't that correct?" A pause. The courtroom leaned in. Jayla rose. Her voice did not rise with her. "Miss Whitfield, you are correct. A phone record alone does not prove identity, which is why I also subpoenaed the call recording itself. Midwest Parts Distributors records every supplier call for quality assurance. I received a certified copy. Defense Exhibit 4. With the court's permission, I'd like the jury to hear it." Whitfield's face did something it had not done all morning. It went white. "Your Honor." "Play it, counsel." The bailiff pressed the button. Through the courtroom speakers, clear as a bell, came Elijah Dawson's voice. "Yeah, hey Mark, it's Elijah over at Cedar Brook. I need 4 sets of those ceramic pads, part number 88812. "Hey Elijah, 4 sets, got it. Appreciate it, man. You having a good night?" "Not bad, Elijah. How's your girl?" "She's reading, Mark, always reading." 6 times. 6 times the supplier called him by name. The timestamp on the recording read 9:24 p.m. to 9:38 p.m. In the jury box, the man in the plaid shirt wiped his eye with the back of his hand. In the second row, Mrs. Greenfield was crying openly. In the defendant's chair, Elijah Dawson dropped his head and wept without sound. Jayla kept her voice steady. "Your Honor, the defense would also like to enter Defense Exhibit 5, a freeze frame from the unedited footage showing the robber's footwear. White canvas sneakers, size 9, per the forensic note on page 31 of the police report. Compared with my father's booking inventory, steel-toed work boots, size 11. And the defense calls Mrs. Hattie Greenfield, who on the night of April 9th observed my father's truck at Cedar Brook Auto from 9:10 p.m. to 10:15 p.m., and who reported that observation to the police 3 separate times." Mrs. Greenfield took the stand in her Sunday dress. She told the truth the way she had told it 3 times before, only now somebody was finally writing it down. When she stepped down, Jayla rose for her closing. 3 minutes, no notes. "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution showed you a piece of a truth and asked you to call it the whole truth. They showed you a black man in a hoodie and asked you to assume. My father is not an assumption. He was on the phone. He was wearing his boots. He was 3 blocks away at work, as he has been every night of my life. The law does not ask you to believe me. The law asks you to look." She sat down. Elijah put his hand over hers on the table and held it. The jury went out at 22 minutes past 2. They came back at 5:34. 3 hours and 12 minutes. 3 hours and 12 minutes in which Elijah Dawson sat in the defendant's chair and prayed into his cuffed hands. And Jayla sat beside him and read and reread the closing argument she had already delivered. And Mrs. Greenfield held a rosary in the second row. and Benjamin Caldwell in the back did not move at all. The foreperson was the man in the plaid shirt. On the charge of armed robbery in the first degree, how do you find? Not guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of use of a firearm in commission of a felony, how do you find? Not guilty, Your Honor. Elijah's shoulders went down like a dam giving way. The gallery erupted. Mrs. Greenfield wept into her Sunday handkerchief. A woman 2 rows behind her shouted, "Thank you, Jesus." Lila Brennan was already typing on her phone, her thumbs moving faster than the clerk's gavel. Jayla did not shout. She did not laugh. She stood up beside her father and she helped him to his feet as the bailiff stepped forward to remove the cuffs. When his hands came free, Elijah turned and pulled his daughter into his chest the way a drowning man pulls a rope, and she let him. And she pressed her face into his gray jumpsuit, and she finally, after 41 days, allowed herself to cry. Judge Howard Blackwood sat on his bench and watched it happen. His face did not move. He did not apologize. He did not clear his throat. He did not offer a single word of acknowledgement to the 17-year-old girl who had just taken his courtroom apart in front of a reporter and a jury of his neighbors. He lifted his gavel. He brought it down once. He said in a voice flat as gray stone, "The defendant is released. Court is adjourned." And he walked off the bench through the side door before the gallery had stopped cheering. Lila Brennan caught Jayla on the marble steps of the courthouse. The late afternoon sun was coming sideways through the columns. "Miss Dawson, one question. What do you want the people of this county to know?" Jayla thought about it. Her father was standing beside her, blinking in the light like a man who had not seen the sun in a long time. "I don't want to talk about the judge. I want to talk about my father. He lost his shop for 6 weeks. He lost his freedom. He lost his trust in a system that was supposed to protect him. That is what it costs when a courtroom decides before it listens." Lila Brennan wrote it all down. The story ran on the front page of the Fairhaven Herald the next morning, above the fold. Headline: Teenager wins acquittal for father. Judge's record under new scrutiny. Alongside the story, the Herald published the sentencing disparity data the publisher had killed the year before. 2.3 times longer, 28 years of it. Every number on the record, for anyone who could read. The article was picked up by the State Wire within 48 hours. By the end of the week, it had traveled further than that. 3 months later, the State Judicial Conduct Commission opened a formal inquiry into the conduct of Judge Howard Blackwood. The complaint was signed by Benjamin Caldwell and co-signed by 9 other attorneys who had tried cases in Courtroom B. The transcript from the Dawson trial was entered as primary evidence. Every word Blackwood had said that morning, the filthy little black girl, the rat, the gutter, the bus, was read aloud in the hearing room. Chief Judge Eleanor Whitlock presided. Blackwood tried to defend himself. He talked about decorum. He talked about the stresses of the bench. He talked about being a man of his generation. The transcript destroyed him before lunch. The panel's ruling came down 6 weeks later. Judge Howard Blackwood was removed from the bench. His pension was reduced to the statutory minimum. His bar license was suspended pending further review. His name was referred to the State Attorney General for potential civil rights violations spanning the full 28 years of his career. Detective Raymond Sullivan was placed under internal affairs investigation within a month. Officer Bradley Morrison was quietly reassigned to a desk job and resigned before the year was out. Prosecutor Catherine Whitfield's campaign for district attorney collapsed before it formally began. Her donors pulled out within 2 weeks of the Herald story. She withdrew her candidacy in a short, stiff press release and left public practice the following spring. Gregory Hollis was publicly censured by the state bar for inadequate representation. His private practice closed by the end of the year. The plaque beside his office door was taken down one Tuesday morning and never replaced. None of them apologized. None of them had to. The consequences did the apologizing for them. 4 years passed. Jayla Dawson graduated from the State University's pre-law program summa cum laude. Her admissions essay to the law school she would attend the following fall was a single transcribed phone call. 14 minutes. April 9th. A man named Elijah, asking about brake pads, being asked how his daughter was doing. "She's reading, Mark. Always reading." The admissions committee voted unanimously. She was offered a full scholarship before the week was out. Elijah reopened Cedarbrook Auto the summer after the acquittal. He painted the sign himself. Above the register, he hung 2 framed photographs. One was Eleanor, laughing at a backyard barbecue the summer before she got sick. The other was Jayla at the defense table, 17 years old. Her mother's blazer rolled twice at the sleeves, 3 binders stacked in front of her. Benjamin Caldwell swore Jayla in as a certified legal intern at Pinewood Legal Aid the summer before she started law school. He stood her in front of the American flag in his cluttered little office and read the oath from a single sheet of paper. His voice shook once, near the end. Jayla did not notice, or pretended not to. When he finished, he handed her back his worn copy of Evidentiary Objections, a trial manual, the one he had lent her 4 years earlier, and told her to keep it. Mrs. Hattie Greenfield sits on her porch every spring afternoon, quilting. A new quilt hangs in Jayla's bedroom, stitched with the scales of justice in small, careful thread. Chief Judge Eleanor Whitlock wrote a law review article the following year titled The Dawson Proceedings, a case study in judicial misconduct and the cost of systemic underestimation. It is now assigned reading in 3 law schools. Howard Blackwood died in a small apartment 2 years after his removal. The funeral was quiet. Almost no one came.